So this next session is going to be great. Kirk Madsen, VP of Sales at One Huddle, is going to be joining David Leonardo. He spent 20 years in franchising, primarily focused on business development. He's currently the CEO of a really cool franchise brand called Chillin' Nitrogen Ice Cream. Please welcome Kirk and David.
All right, I'm excited to be joined by David Leonardo, the CEO of Chillin' Nitrogen Ice Creams. David, how are you?
Pretty good. How are you, Seth?
I'm doing well, thanks. I'm excited to have you with us. Appreciate you taking time out to join us for our Compete Future of Work event. And for those that don't know about you and about Chillin', David, would you mind giving maybe a quick background on yourself and the company?
Yeah, sure. First of all, thanks for having me here. I'm looking forward to sharing my thoughts on kind of the future of work with you. The company I work for is called Chillin' Nitrogen Ice Cream. We're a small regional franchisor based down here in Miami, Florida, in the nitrogen ice cream space, basically making custom, flash-ready ice cream made to order right upon, basically for all the customers that come in. My background has been close to 20 years in franchising, working with some large brands like Burger King, Wendy's, and Arby's, both domestically and internationally, helping them grow, and then working with some other brands like Pet Supplies Plus, developing their franchise development infrastructures. So I'm really excited to join this brand, and joined them about 1.5 years ago. And so it's been interesting times, to say the least.
Quite a ride the last 1.5 years, and especially maybe the last half a year or so. But that's great. I appreciate you kind of giving a quick overview and background. And I'll just kick it off with, obviously, our panels on the future of work. You've been in the franchise space. As you think about sort of the franchise space in general, what are just like off the cuff, like some of your hopes for the future of work and where you see work evolving for the franchise space in the future?
Yeah, that's a good question. Look, I think it's important to recognize the changes that we're all experiencing today outside of COVID, and I think it's a steady increase of automation in all of our environments. What I'd like to see the future of work be is really kind of an emphasis as much on the employees as there is on automating. And so instead of kind of looking at automation as a way to kind of reduce the labor force, I think what I want to do, or what I'd like to see, and what we're doing at our company, is see how automation can allow us to bring in a better labor force, more experienced labor force, and dedicate more resources to train that labor force. And so that's a little bit of how I envision, hopefully, the future of franchising being as we move in that direction.
And at Chillin' specifically, you talked a little bit about kind of taking some of those steps for automation and bringing that into. Can you give like a little bit of background on just one or two of the initiatives that you've been focused on as you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you a great example. What we've been able to do here at Chillin' is we've been able to automate the dispensing of the dairy. So since we're basically pouring dairy into a bowl and adding the ingredients and then adding liquid nitrogen to make the ice cream, we've been able to automate not only the dispensing of that cream into the bowl, but also the dispensing of the liquid nitrogen into the bowl and the mixing of the bowl. And so you can actually operate a store with less employees than you would your traditional ice cream shop. So there's been a huge emphasis on investing in that technology and that software, which is all proprietary. But it's also allowed us to kind of look at how do we increase the experience for a customer while that's going on, right? And so that's a little bit of what we're doing.
When you think about the customer experience and sort of what you get out of your employees and how that impacts the customer experience, like what skills do you feel like are maybe overvalued or undervalued in the workplace, but whether it's at Chillin' or just in the workforce in general today?
Yeah, look, I think curiosity is probably undervalued. I think empathy is undervalued, and proactiveness is undervalued. I think too many times in a corporate setting, I think we don't allow employees to fail, and too many employees are scared to kind of go outside the box. And what I try to do is, in my environment, is I really want to push our employees to do whatever it takes to kind of make that experience for the customer a memorable one. And I think that's one of the things that I think not enough employers are doing enough of, to develop an environment where it's okay for your employees to fail, as long as they're looking to create a better experience for your customers.
So how does you talk about customer experience and making it okay to fail? Like what are a couple of the technological things that you see coming down the pike in franchising? You talked a little bit about automation and specifically how it relates to Chillin. What things do you see happening more and more frequently around the landscape in the franchise space to be able to free up some more time for people at the company to think about how to just go out of their way, go above and beyond in how they act with people versus the actual manual task of getting the job done?
Yeah, well, look, I think vendors play a big role in that. I think franchising, if anything, has led to an explosion in vendors that are allowing you to enhance different areas of your business. A good example is, frankly, yourself, One Huddle, as a small company with only 8 locations, we don't have the G&A to hire an entire HR department to go out and train our people. But to be able to kind of bring on an application and create some games that we can deploy across an entire staff and be able to monitor that allows us to free up some capital here, internally, to kind of reward those employees when they're performing well, to incentivize other employees. And so I think while One Huddle is an example, there's other vendors. And so I think one of the things that's happening in franchising is there are some key vendors that are recognizing that if they can make the life easier for a franchisor to focus on operations and focus on customer retention and customer growth, they could actually help move that needle, right? And that's, I think, what's happening in franchising, whereas historically franchisors have had to take on a lot of that themselves. We're in an environment now where you can outsource that to companies that can do it extremely efficiently and can get as much return of it that you can by hiring internally.
Just kind of as you think about the industry itself and the way that things like COVID right now have been impacting openings and closings and procedures and policies, what are the long-term impacts that you foresee coming out of it? Beyond the days that look, there'll come a day, knock on wood, hopefully a day very soon, where masks and gloves and things like that are a thing of the past, or maybe not. Maybe that is one of the things that you see happening long term. But just kind of give me your thoughts on what do you think will change in the attitudes or the actions of not only the people working in the franchise space, but the customers coming in each and every day.
Yeah, that's a great question, Kirk. I think one of the biggest changes for us on a corporate level is recognizing that you don't necessarily need everybody coming into a corporate environment every day in order to get productivity out of them, right? In order for them to be as productive as possible. I think that's going to be a monumental change that's probably here to stay, because all of the companies that were reluctant to do it before have now realized that, hey, it's not as bad. It's not as bad as we thought it would be. So that's a small thing. In regards to at the store level, one of the big fundamental changes that we've done and we've accelerated is really the move towards delivery or pickup services, things of that nature that allow people to come in, pick up their order and go, or bring on delivery partners like we brought on since this all started. I think a lot of that is here to stay, maybe not to the extent that it's been over the last couple of weeks, but I think a lot of people are going to find themselves feeling a lot more comfortable ordering where a couple months ago they just didn't feel comfortable ordering.
Do you feel like this sort of like omni-channel approach that you're talking about, where you've got delivery, pickup, in store, even some brands that have started to think more and more about grocery as times like this have started. Do you feel like those all of those channels are here to stay, or just some? Is it dependent on the economics for each business? Like,
Yeah,
what's the?
I think the economics it's gonna come down to economics. I think obviously once we get into a post-COVID world, we'll see kind of what happens when the dust settles.
Yeah.
All of these delivery partners and all of these different channels are having, you would say, a good experience.
They're having a moment right now.
Yeah, they're having a moment, right?
Yeah.
But I think ultimately when the dust settles, it's going to be about how they can serve us and our customers and how can we differentiate the experience through them. So do I think they're here to stay? Yes. Do I think it's going to be as congested as it is today? No.
Sure.
I do think there's going to, net out, there's going to be a couple big players that are going to be able to stand out.
I'd love to go back. You mentioned sort of this concept that you think remote work is probably an increased part of our future, no matter what happens with COVID. And I think a lot of us are feeling that right now. Yeah. What do you feel like is missing when you work remotely? What do you feel like you don't get? And then on the trade-off, what do you get and it's better than being in the office?
Yeah. It's that's a great question. I will tell you that one of the things you don't get is you don't get a lot of the side conversations that lead to a lot of brainstorming sessions that you would in a conference room. That typical 5 or 10 minutes before a call or 5 minutes after a meeting. Yeah, that water cooler kind of conversation or that going out to lunch conversation that can spur a lot of thinking. That's not happening as much as it would if you were in a corporate setting. However, I do think that it opens up the opportunity for you to create other ways in which you can become more creative with other individuals. I think there's going to be an entire creation of industry in terms of how to create more cohesiveness in the work environment via virtual workplaces and things of that nature. And so as a leader of our organization, how do I create more opportunities for us to interact online? And then how do I create different projects or different ways for people to collaborate together, even if they're doing it remotely, so that we can create that cohesiveness that we had before.
A lot on the franchise side, just to sort of shift gears and think a little bit about online and just sort of the experience of people online right now. A lot of franchises around the country, and I'm sure at Chillin too, have a lot of young people in the workforce, and a lot of those folks are in college, or they're some even in high school in some places. So I guess as we think about not only the current state of college and just sort of the educational system, how do you feel like the educational system plays a role in making sure that people are ready for the jobs that are coming down the line tomorrow? Like, are they hitting the mark? Are they missing the mark? What's your sense as you work with and talk to some of your colleagues around the industry?
Yeah, it's a great question, especially in light of some of the recent news. I don't know if you've heard, obviously some schools have decided to go virtual for next year already. And in some cases, I think a little of the pushback is some of their tuition hasn't been impacted. Yeah. I think where you're having a little bit of a disconnect, at least for us, is we're predominantly made up of high school and college students in our employee base. It becomes really hard for an individual to start a career in, let's say, our field when they're coming out of college with a high degree of debt. Mm-hmm. And so if we're not able to tackle the large amount of debt that some of these college students are coming out with, I think we're going to have issues in our workforce for years to come. And actually, it's going to trickle down to the economy, because these individuals are the ones you want buying homes 10, 15 years from now. And so looking back on my career and how I got a start, I'll be honest with you, for me, it was a little bit less about what I learned in school, although I went to a great institution, but really more about the internships that I was able to develop and the networking I was able to develop. So as I look at developing my own workforce, I first look at who within the ranks of our workforce in the store has the potential or the interest to come into corporate. Who's majoring in marketing, who has an interest in operations, and these individuals. And as of right now, everyone in our corporate team started off as an employee in our stores. And so I'm very proud of that. And then the second thing is, if I go out of that and I have to go into recruiting people outside of that, how do I recruit people that have some good experience, and how do I recruit people that look like all of us down here and all of our customer base down here, right?
Yeah.
We're really committed to diversity here. We're committed to bringing in a workforce that can bring in a lot of different ideas based on their background, based on their cultural differences. And I think that's actually interesting because I think that movement is also living, it's kind of having its moment as well today.
We are, believe it or not, I can't believe how quickly the time flies. We're coming up a little bit on time for our session here, and maybe I'll close out. You talk you talk a lot about what needs to change, right, at the sort of the post-college level for kids coming out of school to be able to jump in and have that first job and feel like they can learn and grow and spend the time they need versus immediately having to search for that next thing.
Yeah.
If you could wave a wand and make a policy change or some sort of shift at the, at the government level, like how do we make an impact that helps bring kids out of school and into the workforce with less pressure, less stress than they're entering it today?
Yeah, I think you have to address the tuition bubble that's occurring in this country. I think if you really want to create more mobility within our workforce, you want to allow more innovation and people to take more risk, especially college students, to come in and fuel an industry that maybe doesn't have the money to pay them as much. You really have to address the inequities that occur in a lot of the students that are coming out with a huge amount of debt. So if we can get our policymakers to address the large burden that's bestowed upon college graduates coming out with huge debt, and whether it's working for a couple years, contributing back to this economy through some sort of volunteer force to write down their debt, that's great as well. Working in an industry at a discount, but you're getting your loans written off, that's a great, I don't know what that infrastructure looks like. I'm not saying a complete write-off, but if we can create something where they can come off out of colleges with a great experience without this huge burden, the economy can benefit from their labor, and their contributions, and then they can contribute and go into different industries without this overall financial burden. I think it would benefit the entire economy as a whole.
Well, thank you. Appreciate the perspective there. David, any sign-off items that you'd want to add? Any just big level thoughts that, popped to your mind as we've talked through some of the future work that we haven't gotten a chance to touch on yet today that you want to?
Nothing other than I am extremely optimistic by nature. And just looking at the amount of people that have approached us in the last couple months that are interested in franchising in light of everything gives me so much optimism about what's to come.
That's awesome.
Similar to what happened in 2008, we are in a very tough place right now, but if the recovery is going to be anything like it was before, I'm really optimistic about what's to come.
Well, that's great. Well, we're up on time. So I want to thank David Leonardo. I appreciate you being here and representing Chillin. And we will obviously continue to watch your success and appreciate all of your support. I know I had some really interesting takeaways and things as you were talking through a number of different points today, and I'm sure all of you out there will have them as well. So again, David, thank you. Appreciate you being here.
Kurt. Thank you so much for your time.
And we'll keep the session going.
All right.